All right, hello everyone. My name is Steele Ebers, and I'm partnering up with Graeme Rios, and we're going to be talking about the three economies: U.S., China, and Germany, and we're going to compare all three of them. So, a brief introduction on economic freedom basically refers to individuals and businesses being able to make their own economic decisions, what to produce, who to produce it for, and how to produce it. And this is with little to no interference from the government. It encourages innovation, drives efficiency, and ultimately contributes to economic growth and prosperity. And like I mentioned before, the three markets that we're going to choose from is the US, China, and Germany. Some key concepts before we get into the presentation. We want to look at a managed market. That basically means a market where the government is in control of basically everything. That would be China in this case. We're going to look at GDP, gross domestic product, the total monetary value of all finished goods and services produced within a country's borders. FDI, foreign direct investment, shows how much an entity from one country is making in terms of investment with another country. We're going to be scoring each of the markets, and the scores we're going to use are as follows. We have the Heritage Economic Freedom Index score. It's going to be scored 0 to 100. It basically measures a country's economic openness. We're going to look at the Fraser Economic Freedom score, which is 0 to 10, which measures a country's level of economic freedom based on government size, legal systems, and market openness. We're going to look at the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index score of 0 to 100. Basically measures public sector corruption, and then unemployment rates for each market as well. So the first market, we got the US. Let's go ahead and look at each of the scores. For the Heritage Freedom Index score, it scores 70.6. For the Fraser Economic score, we got 8.09. And then for the Transparency Corruption Index score, we got 69 out of 100. Moving on to the GDP and FDI of the country, 25.4 trillion, which actually makes the US the largest global economy. Foreign direct investment was 400 billion with net flows of 1.7%. And then the unemployment rate of the US is 3.5%. And then here we have a graph, basically shows how GDP and FDI contribute to one another. A higher GDP is going to contribute to a higher FDI, as you can see in the graph. Makes sense, right? If you have a higher GDP, you're making more money, you're a greater economic asset. More people are going to want to invest into that asset, which is demonstrated here in the graph. So let's go ahead and summarize all these scores and what they mean. So US scored a 70.6, which means it's basically mostly free. Then you have 8.09, which showcases high efficiency and innovation. And then if you look at US's corruption score of 69 out of 100, that means it has moderate corruption levels. There's institutional trust, could improve, but supports robust governance. Look at the GDP, 25.4 trillion, basically demonstrates large economic scale and leadership. And then if you look at the FDI unemployment, it showcases global investment appeal and a stable labor market within the US. So the next market, we got China, which is the managed market. Look at their scores here. You got 48.5, 6.14, and then 42 out of 100. Look at the GDP, you got 17.79 trillion, FDI of 81.80 billion with a net flow of 0.2%. And an unemployment rate of 4.7% out of not out of anything. It's higher, a little bit higher than the US. So yeah. So that's going to do it for me on this presentation. I'm now going to pass it on to my partner. So thank you
Yeah,
all for
so
listening.
the World Bank GDP for China has grown exponentially over the years, as you can see from this chart. Trying to go fast through this, but the economic scores, China's at 48.5, which is on the lower side, and then 6.14, which is a moderate score, and 42 out of 100, which is also a moderate score. And they're very high in GDP at 17.79 trillion. Um, they're getting 81.8 million from FDI, which is fairly low, and the net flow is 0.2%, which is basically nothing. And the employment rate is 4.7%, which is a low employment rate. Now, Germany has a 72.1 freedom index score, and their economic score is 7.8, and they're 78 out of 100 on the corruption perception. Their GDP is lower at 4.46 trillion, and their FDI is also lower at 48.84 billion. But in perspective, they're at 1.2%, whereas their unemployment rate is the lowest at 3%. They've had a steady growth over the past 60 years. Um, they were down basically because of World War II, and they've had a steady increase ever since, and now it's way past it, so grown exponentially. Yeah, so they're mostly free. They have high market efficiency, low corruption, which fosters trust and investment and effective governance. Um, so to compare, U.S. at 70.6 and Germany at 72.1 are roughly the same, whereas China is repressed at 48.5. And then on the economic freedom score, US at 8.09, which is a high freedom. Germany is also pretty high at 7.8, and then China is fairly moderate at 6.4. Yeah, so transparency of corruption. 69 isn't bad, but Germany is clearly favored at 70 out of 100, which is the cleanest out of the grouping, at one of the cleanest overall. And then GDP wise, the United States is by far the highest, and then China at 17.79, and then Germany followed. Yeah, so the FDI, which you've already hit on, the United States is at 1.7% of net flow, which is $400 billion, which is fairly high, whereas China is extremely low and Germany is moderate flow. And then the unemployment rate, Germany is the lowest, China is the highest, but we're all about the same, relatively speaking. So in conclusion, Germany combines high economic freedom, low corruption, and strong labor market performance. Um, and the United States is fairly similar with slightly lower corruption perception. And China scores lower in basically all of those, just greater restriction because of their government. Germany appears to be the most free overall, considering the high scores and everything. The United States is a strong contender, falls slightly. And China is the least free market with significant constraints. And then here's a graph of all of the indexes and scores. Thank you guys. No reference.